John Miller was not the kind of man who stood out in a crowd. He was average in almost every way. Average height, average looks, and an average life that had taken a turn for the worse. Once upon a time, John had dreams bigger than himself. Dreams of running a cozy little diner where people would gather to share meals, stories, and laughter. But now those dreams felt like distant memories, buried under piles of unpaid bills and broken promises. The restaurant sat on the corner of Main Street, its faded sign flickering weakly in the cold winter air. The letters, Miller's Diner, were barely legible anymore, much like John's spirit. Inside, the tables were dusty, the chairs stacked neatly against the walls, and the kitchen untouched for days. Customers no longer came, and even when they did, it wasn't enough to keep the business alive. Every morning, John woke up dreading the day ahead. Every night, he went to bed wondering how long he could hold on before giving up completely. But, despite all the struggles, John couldn't bring himself to close the diner. It was more than just a building or a business. It was a piece of his soul. His grandmother had once owned the place, and she had taught him everything about cooking, hospitality, and making people feel at home. Closing it down would mean letting go of the last thing tying him to her memory. So, day after day, he kept showing up, hoping against hope that things would somehow get better. One particularly bitter evening, as snowflakes swirled outside and the wind howled through the cracks in the old wooden door, John prepared to lock up for the night. He had spent hours cleaning the already spotless floors and wiping down counters that hadn't seen use in days. As he stepped into the alley behind the diner to take out the trash, something caught his eye. Huddled near the dumpster were two figures wrapped in tattered blankets. One was a man, his face gaunt and weary, and beside him sat a small girl, her wide eyes peeking out from beneath a woolen cap pulled low over her ears. John hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. He wasn't exactly in a position to help anyone else. Yet something about the sight tugged at his heartstrings. The man looked defeated, his shoulders slumped as if carrying the weight of the world. The little girl clung to him tightly, shivering despite the layers of clothing she wore. They didn't look dangerous, they looked desperate. "Hey," John called out softly, stepping closer. "Are you okay?" The man startled, looking up with wary eyes. "We're fine," he said quickly, though his voice betrayed exhaustion. "Just trying to stay warm." John frowned. Stay warm? In this freezing weather? Without thinking, he gestured toward the back entrance of the diner. "Come inside," he said firmly. "You can't stay out here." For a moment, the man hesitated, glancing at the girl protectively. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Thank you," he murmured, helping the child to her feet. Inside, John led them to a booth near the window. The warmth of the diner seemed to seep into their bones immediately. The little girl stared around in awe, her eyes lighting up at the sight of the colorful Christmas lights strung along the walls. John disappeared into the kitchen and returned moments later with steaming bowls of soup, fresh bread, and mugs of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream. "This is delicious," the girl exclaimed between sips, her cheeks flushing pink from the heat of the drink. Her father smiled faintly, though his expression remained guarded. "I'm Mark," he introduced himself quietly, "and this is Emily." "I'm John," he replied, sliding into the seat across from them. "What brings you here?" Mark sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "It's complicated," he began. "We lost our home a few months ago. An accident left me unable to work, and we've been moving from place to place ever since. Tonight we were just looking for somewhere safe to sleep." John listened silently, his chest tightening with empathy. He knew what it was like to lose control of your life, to feel like the ground beneath you was crumbling away. When Mark finished speaking, John leaned forward slightly. "Look, I don't have much," he admitted. "But there's an apartment, upstairs above the diner. It's small and needs some fixing up, but it's dry and warm. If you want, you can stay there until you get back on your feet." Mark's eyes widened in disbelief. "You'd really do that for us?" he asked, his voice trembling. John shrugged, trying to play it off as no big deal. Everyone deserves a roof over their head, especially on a night like this. Emily beamed at him, her smile radiant enough to light up the entire diner. "Thank you, Mr. John," she chirped happily. That night, as Mark and Emily settled into the tiny apartment upstairs, John found himself standing alone in the empty diner, staring out at the falling snow. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in ages. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, opening his doors to strangers wasn't such a foolish idea after all. Over the next few days, John noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere of the diner. Mark, it turned out, was incredibly handy. He fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, tightened loose floorboards, and even patched up the cracked tiles in the bathroom. Emily, meanwhile, brought a sense of joy that had been missing for far too long. She greeted customers with a cheerful good morning, folded napkins into intricate shapes, and drew whimsical pictures of smiling animals that John taped proudly to the walls. Slowly but surely, the diner started to feel alive again. Customers lingered longer, chatting with Emily or marveling at Mark's repairs. Word spread about the quirky little diner with the friendly staff and cozy vibe. Business picked up slightly, enough to ease some of John's financial burdens. More importantly, the three of them formed a bond stronger than any blood relation. John realized that Mark and Emily weren't just guests, they were family. Yet as the weeks passed, John couldn't shake the feeling that fate had a way of testing even the strongest connections. Little did he know, the biggest challenge of their lives was lurking just around the corner, waiting to test their newfound happiness. As the days turned into weeks, John began to notice something extraordinary happening in his once empty diner. It wasn't just that Mark and Emily had moved in above the restaurant. It was how they had breathed new life into every corner of the space. The diner, which had felt like a ghost town for so long, now buzzed with energy. Mark's steady hands worked tirelessly behind the scenes, repairing what years of neglect had broken. Emily's laughter echoed through the halls, filling the air with a warmth that John hadn't realized he'd been missing. Mark was determined to earn his keep. Every morning he woke up before sunrise and got straight to work. He patched up the leaky roof, fixed the squeaky door hinges, and even painted the walls a cheerful shade of yellow. His efforts transformed the tired old building into something brighter, fresher, and more inviting. Customers who walked in couldn't help but remark on how different the place felt. Gone were the cobwebs and the dull gray tones. In their place stood a cozy, welcoming diner that seemed to radiate kindness. Emily, too, played her part in reviving the spirit of the diner. She became its unofficial mascot, greeting everyone who came in with a wide grin and a friendly, "Hello." Her creativity knew no bounds. She folded napkins into origami animals, drew colorful menus featuring smiling fruits and vegetables, and decorated the bulletin board with drawings of happy families eating together. One customer jokingly called her the diner fairy, saying she sprinkled magic wherever she went. And perhaps there was some truth to that. People started coming not just for the food, but for the joy and warmth that Emily brought with her. Presence. John watched all of this unfold with a mixture of awe and gratitude. For years he had struggled alone, carrying the weight of his failing business on his shoulders. But now he wasn't alone anymore. Mark and Emily had become more than just tenants. They were partners, friends, and family. Together, they formed a team unlike any other. John handled the cooking, whipping up hearty meals that reminded customers of home. Mark took care of the maintenance, ensuring everything ran smoothly. And Emily? Well, she was the heart of the operation, spreading happiness wherever she went. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. Over late-night dinners in the small apartment upstairs, they shared stories about their lives. Mark spoke of his wife, Emily's mother, who had passed away after a long illness. He talked about the accident that left him unable to work, a fall from a ladder that shattered his leg and drained their savings. Despite everything, he remained fiercely protective of Emily, doing whatever it took to shield her from the hardships they faced. Emily, on the other hand, spoke of school, her favorite books, and her dreams of becoming an artist someday. Her innocence and optimism were infectious, reminding John and Mark of the simple joys in life. She often asked John questions about his own childhood, eager to learn about the grandmother who had taught him to cook. In return, John told her stories of growing up in the diner, of sneaking bites of pie as a child, and watching his grandmother serve countless customers with a smile. These conversations created a sense of connection that none of them had experienced in a long time. But life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. Just when things seemed to be improving, trouble arrived at their doorstep, or rather, inside the diner itself. One rainy afternoon, as John was busy flipping pancakes and Mark was fixing a loose tile near the entrance, 3 men in expensive suits walked in. Their polished shoes clicked against the freshly cleaned floor, and their stern expressions made it clear they weren't here for breakfast. "Are you John Miller?" one of them asked, his tone clipped and formal. John nodded cautiously, setting down the spatula. "That's me. Can I help you?" The man pulled out a sleek leather folder and opened it to reveal official-looking documents. "We represent a development company interested in purchasing this property," he explained. "Our client is prepared to offer you a generous sum for the land." John blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry, but this place isn't for sale." The second man stepped forward, his voice colder than the rain outside. "Mr. Miller, let's be realistic here. From what we've seen, your business is struggling. This offer could solve all your financial problems. Why turn it down?" John's jaw tightened. Struggling or not, the diner was his home, his legacy. Selling it would mean giving up everything he cared about. "I appreciate the offer," he said firmly, "but I'm not selling." The third man smirked, clearly unimpressed. "You might want to reconsider. We have ways of making this difficult for you." With that ominous warning, the trio turned and left, leaving John standing frozen in the middle of the diner. Mark appeared beside him moments later, concern etched across his face. "What was that about?" he asked. John sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "They want to buy the diner. Said they'll make things hard if I don't sell." Mark frowned, his protective instincts kicking in. "You can't give in to them, John. This place means too much. Not just to you, but to us. To everyone who comes here." "I know," John replied quietly. "But fighting them won't be easy. They're rich, powerful, and used to getting their way." For the rest of the day, the mood in the diner was somber. Even Emily seemed to sense that something was wrong. She tugged at John's sleeve during dinner that night, her big eyes filled with worry. "Is someone trying to take our home?" she asked softly. John knelt down to her level, forcing a smile. "Don't you worry, sweetheart. No one's taking this place away from us, not without a fight." Though his words were brave, doubt gnawed at him. How could he possibly stand up to corporate lawyers and developers? He barely had enough money to cover next month's rent, let alone hire legal representation. As he lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, he wondered if he had made a mistake by refusing their offer. Maybe selling the diner really was the only option. But then he thought about Mark and Emily, about the repairs Mark had made, the joy Emily had brought, and the community that had begun to rally around them. This wasn't just his battle, it was theirs. If they were going to fight, they would do it together. The next morning, John gathered Mark and Emily in the kitchen. "We need a plan," he announced. "If we're going to keep this place, we'll have to prove we're serious about staying. That means gathering evidence, reaching out to people who can help, and showing those developers that this diner is worth fighting for." Mark nodded resolutely. "Count me in. I'll do whatever it takes." Emily raised her hand excitedly. "I can make posters and tell everyone how great this place is." John chuckled despite himself. Leave it to Emily to find a way to contribute. "All right, team," he said, clapping his hands together. "Let's get to work." Over the following weeks, they threw themselves into the fight. Mark scoured libraries and online resources, learning everything he could about property laws and tenant rights. He reached out to local activists and organizations dedicated to preserving small businesses. Emily, true to her word, created flyers and handed them out to customers, urging them to spread the word. She even convinced a local news station to feature their story, highlighting the diner's role as a community hub. Meanwhile, John focused on rallying support from the neighborhood. He invited regulars to meetings, explaining the situation and asking for their help. To his surprise, many offered to donate money or volunteer their time. Some even promised to attend protests if it came to that. Slowly but surely, a movement began to form. Posters appeared in shop windows, petitions circulated online, and social media buzzed with hashtags like Yarshursk Save Miller's Diner. Through it all, the trio remained united. Late nights were spent strategizing over cups of coffee, early mornings preparing for another day of campaigning. There were moments of frustration and exhaustion, but also triumphs that kept them going. When a city council member agreed to meet with them, they celebrated with homemade cookies. When a lawyer offered pro bono assistance, they cheered until their voices were hoarse. Still, the looming threat of the developers weighed heavily on their minds. They knew the battle wouldn't be easy, and the odds were stacked against them. But they also knew one thing for certain: they weren't going down without a fight. Together, they had built something special, a place where love, kindness, and resilience thrived, and nothing, not money, power, or intimidation, was going to take that away from them. As the court date approached, nerves ran high. Would their efforts be enough? Could they truly stand up to the forces arrayed against them? Only time would tell. But one thing was clear: whatever happened next, they would face it side by side, as a family. The day of the court hearing arrived, and the air was thick with tension. John, Mark, and Emily stood outside the courthouse, their hearts pounding like drums. They had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence, rallying support, and praying that justice would prevail. Yet as they climbed the steps to the imposing building, doubt crept into their minds. Could they really win against a team of high-powered lawyers representing a wealthy developer? It felt like David versus Goliath, except this time, the odds seemed even more impossible. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was formal and intimidating. Rows of wooden benches stretched out before them, filled with curious onlookers and reporters eager to document the outcome. At the front, the judge's bench loomed large, its polished surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. On one side sat the developer's legal team, dressed in sharp suits and exuding confidence. On the other side stood John, Mark, and their lawyer, Ms. Harper, a kind-hearted woman who had agreed to take on their case pro bono after hearing their story. As the proceedings began, the developer's attorney launched into a well-rehearsed argument. He spoke of progress, economic growth, and how demolishing Miller's Diner would pave the way for a modern shopping complex that would benefit the entire community. His words were smooth and persuasive, painting John and his diner as relics of the past standing in the way of a brighter future. When it was John's turn to speak, his hands trembled as he gripped the railing. For a moment he froze, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. But then he glanced back at Mark and Emily, sitting quietly in the audience. Their presence gave him strength. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak. "This diner isn't just a building," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves coursing through him. "It's a home, for me, for my friends, and for everyone who walks through its doors. My grandmother built this place decades ago, not just to serve food, but to bring people together. It's where families celebrate birthdays, where strangers become friends, and where hope finds a foothold when everything else feels lost." He paused, looking directly at the judge. "Yes, business has been tough. Yes, I've struggled to keep the lights on. But giving up isn't an option. Not when this place means so much to so many people. Selling it to these developers wouldn't just destroy a piece of history, it would rip apart the fabric of our community." His words resonated deeply with those in the room. Even some of the reporters scribbling furiously in their notebooks looked up, moved by his sincerity. When John finished speaking, there was a brief silence before the judge nodded thoughtfully. Next, Mark took the stand. Though usually quiet and reserved, he spoke passionately about the months he and Emily had spent living above the diner. He described how John had taken them in when they had nowhere else to go, how the diner had given them a second chance at life. "This place saved us," he said, his voice breaking slightly. And now we're trying to save it. Please don't let them take it away. Finally, it was Emily's turn. She walked slowly to the front, her small frame dwarfed by the vastness of the courtroom. Clutching a stack of drawings she had made, she looked up at the judge with wide, earnest eyes. I drew pictures of the diner because it makes me happy, she explained softly, holding up her artwork. It's where I feel safe, where I belong. If they tear it down, I won't have anywhere to go. Her innocence and vulnerability struck a chord with everyone present. Even the developer's lawyers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. By the time Emily returned to her seat, tears glistened in the eyes of several spectators. After hours of arguments, counter-arguments, and deliberation, the judge finally delivered the verdict. The courtroom fell silent as he adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Based on the evidence presented, he announced, including the historical significance of the property and the overwhelming support from the community, I rule in favor of the defendants. The diner will remain standing. A wave of relief washed over John, Mark, and Emily. Cheers erupted from the crowd and strangers hugged each other in celebration. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around them asking for interviews and snapping photos. For the first time in months, John allowed himself to smile genuinely. Against all odds, they had won. Moving forward. Together in the days. Following the court victory, the diner became busier than ever. Inspired by their story, locals flocked to show their support, bringing friends and family along. Customers lined up out the door, eager to taste the food and meet the heroes of the battle. Business boomed, and for the first time in years, John didn't worry about making ends meet. Mark officially joined as a partner, using his skills to expand the menu and improve the space. With his handyman expertise, he transformed the old storage room into a cozy reading nook stocked with books, donated by customers. Emily, meanwhile, took charge of decorating the walls with murals celebrating their journey. Her vibrant artwork told the story of their struggle and triumph, turning the diner into a living testament to resilience. Every Friday night, they hosted free meals for anyone in need, ensuring that no one felt forgotten or alone. Word spread quickly, and soon the diner became known not just for its food but for its compassion. Homeless individuals, struggling families, and lonely seniors found solace within its walls. It was more than a restaurant, it was a sanctuary. Yet life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. One stormy evening, as they closed up after a busy day, disaster struck. A fire broke out in the kitchen, sparked by faulty wiring hidden behind the ancient stove. Flames engulfed the space rapidly, consuming years of hard work in mere minutes. Firefighters arrived just in time to prevent the blaze from spreading to neighboring buildings, but the damage was catastrophic. Standing amidst the charred remains, the next morning, John felt the familiar weight of despair pressing down on him. Everything they had fought so hard to protect was gone. The tables, the chairs, the colorful murals reduced to ash and rubble. How could they possibly recover from this? But as he surveyed the wreckage, something unexpected happened. Neighbors began showing up, armed with tools, supplies, and offers of help. Volunteers streamed in from all corners of the community, determined to rebuild what had been lost. Local businesses donated furniture, appliances, and funds. Strangers sent messages of encouragement, reminding John, Mark, and Emily that they weren't alone. Even the developers who had tried to seize the property sent a check, accompanied by a note that read, "We admire your courage and resilience. This is our contribution to help you rebuild." Touched by the outpouring of support, John realized something profound. The fire had destroyed their physical space, but it couldn't touch the spirit of the diner or the bond they shared. With renewed determination, they set to work planning a new chapter for Miller's Diner. This time, it would be bigger, brighter, and more welcoming than ever. As construction began, John often reflected on how far they'd come. What started as an act of kindness, a simple decision to open his doors to two strangers, had blossomed into something extraordinary. Through trials and tribulations, they had faced every challenge head-on, proving that love, unity, and perseverance could overcome even the greatest obstacles. Months later, when the newly rebuilt diner reopened its doors, the celebration was nothing short of magical. Hundreds of people gathered to mark the occasion, sharing laughter, tears, and stories of how the little diner had touched their lives. As John raised a glass to toast the future, surrounded by those who mattered most, he knew one thing for certain: whatever came next, they would face it together. The fire had left a gaping hole where Miller's Diner once stood, a blackened, charred shell of its former self. Smoke still lingered in the air, and the acrid smell of burnt wood clung to everything. John stared at the ruins, his heart heavy with despair. It felt like déjà vu, another disaster threatening to take away the only thing that mattered to him. But this time, it wasn't just about losing a building or a business. This was personal. The diner wasn't just a place. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and community. And now it was gone. As the reality of the situation sank in, tears welled up in John's eyes. He had fought so hard to protect the diner, to keep it alive against all odds. He had poured every ounce of energy into rebuilding after the court battle, only for fate to deal another cruel blow. Standing there amidst the wreckage, he couldn't help but wonder if it was all for nothing. Could they really start over again? Did they even have the strength to try? But before he could spiral deeper into despair, voices began to call out behind him. Turning around, John saw a group of neighbors approaching, their arms laden with tools, supplies, and food. At the front of the group was Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who had been a regular at the diner since it first opened. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes sparkled with determination. "John," she said firmly, "you're not doing this alone. We're here to help." One by one, others stepped forward, offering whatever they could. A young carpenter named Alex volunteered to lead the reconstruction efforts. A local bakery owner promised to supply bread and pastries until the diner reopened. Even children from the neighborhood showed up, carrying buckets of paint and brushes, eager to contribute. Mark and Emily arrived shortly after, having heard the news. Emily clutched a stuffed animal tightly to her chest, her eyes wide with shock. Mark put a reassuring hand on John's shoulder. "We'll rebuild," he said simply. Together. For the next few days, the site of the burned-down diner transformed into a hive of activity. Volunteers worked tirelessly, clearing debris, salvaging what they could, and laying the foundation for a new structure. Neighbors brought meals and refreshments, turning the cleanup effort into a communal event. Laughter and conversation filled the air, softening the blow of the tragedy. Slowly but surely, hope began to replace despair. Emily played a key role in keeping spirits high. She wandered among the workers, handing out cups of water and brightly colored drawings she had made to thank them for their efforts. Her cheerful presence lifted everyone's mood, reminding them why they were working so hard. "This is going to be the best diner ever," she declared confidently, pointing to a sketch she had drawn of the new design. In her vision, the diner featured large windows, flower boxes, and a mural depicting the entire community coming together. Inspired by her optimism, John, Mark, and the volunteers threw themselves into the project with renewed vigor. They decided to use the opportunity to make improvements that would ensure the diner's survival for years to come. The kitchen was redesigned with modern equipment, the dining area expanded to accommodate more customers, and solar panels installed on the roof to reduce energy costs. Every decision was made with care, reflecting the values of sustainability, inclusivity, and warmth. As the weeks passed, the skeleton of the new diner began to take shape. Walls rose from the ashes, painted in vibrant colors chosen by Emily. The reading nook Mark had created in the old storage room became a cozy library corner, stocked with books donated by customers. Outside, a small garden sprouted, planted by volunteers who wanted to add a touch of greenery to the space. Throughout the process, stories of kindness poured in from unexpected places. Strangers sent letters and donations, sharing how the diner had touched their lives. One letter came from a man who had proposed to his wife at a booth near the window. Another was from a college student who credited the free Friday night meals with helping her stay focused during tough times. Each story reinforced the importance of what they were building. Not just a restaurant, but a sanctuary for those in need. Even the developers who had once tried to seize the property reached out. Along with a generous check, they included a note expressing admiration for the resilience of the little diner that refused to give up. "You've shown us what true strength looks like," it read. "Please accept this as our contribution to your rebirth." Despite the progress, challenges remained. Funding gaps threatened to delay construction, and disagreements occasionally arose among the team about design choices. But through it all, John, Mark, and Emily remained steadfast. They reminded themselves of the reason they were doing this: to create a space where love, kindness, and connection thrived. Finally, months later, the day came when the diner was ready to reopen. The grand celebration was planned for a Saturday evening, and the entire town buzzed with anticipation. Flyers adorned shop windows, social media posts went viral, and local news stations covered the event extensively. The diner had become more than just a business. It was a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of unity and perseverance. On the big day, crowds gathered outside the newly rebuilt Miller's Diner long before the doors opened. The exterior gleamed under the late afternoon sun, its freshly painted facade adorned with flowers and banners. Inside, the space was unrecognizable, yet unmistakably familiar. The warm, inviting atmosphere remained intact, enhanced by modern touches that made it feel fresh and contemporary. Emily's mural stretched across one wall, capturing the essence of the community's journey. When the doors finally swung open, cheers erupted. Customers streamed in, marveling at the transformation. Tables filled quickly, and the line for the buffet snaked out the door. Speeches were given, tears shed, and laughter rang out late into the night. Mark stood proudly behind the counter, serving plates of food with a smile. Emily darted between tables, chatting with customers and handing out origami napkins. And John? He stood near the entrance, shaking hands and hugging people as they entered, overwhelmed by gratitude. At one point, the crowd quieted as John took the microphone to speak. "I never thought I'd see this day," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "When the fire happened, I thought we'd lost everything. But you showed me that we hadn't. You reminded me that the soul of this place isn't in the walls or the furniture. It's in the people who walk through the doors. It's in the love and kindness we share with each other." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "This diner is proof that no matter how hard life gets, we can rise from the ashes. Together we can overcome anything. Thank you for believing in us, for standing by us, and for making this dream come true." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing through the streets of the neighborhood. As fireworks lit up the sky above the diner, John, Mark, and Emily stood side by side, watching the celebration unfold. They had faced unimaginable challenges, but they had emerged stronger because of them. The diner wasn't just a building anymore. It was a living testament to the power of community, resilience, and love. And though the road ahead might still hold obstacles, they knew one thing for certain: as long as they had each other, they could face anything. For Miller's Diner wasn't just a place, it was a family. And families stick together, no matter what. The grand reopening of Miller's Diner marked the start of a new chapter, not just for John, Mark, and Emily, but for the entire community. The fire that had once seemed like the end of everything had instead become a catalyst for growth and transformation. What emerged from the ashes was more than just a rebuilt diner. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and unity. And as the days turned into weeks, the diner continued to thrive in ways no one could have predicted. John, Mark, and Emily worked harder than ever to ensure that the diner remained a beacon of warmth and kindness. Every morning they arrived, before sunrise, to prepare fresh meals, clean the space, and greet customers with smiles. The menu expanded to include dishes inspired by the diverse cultures of the neighborhood: spicy curries, hearty stews, and delicate pastries, all prepared with love and care. Customers raved about the food, but what truly set the diner apart was the sense of belonging it offered. Whether you were a regular or a first-time visitor, stepping inside felt like coming home. Emily, now older and more confident, took on a bigger role in running the diner. She designed posters, advertising upcoming events, organized art workshops for kids, and even started a storytelling night where locals could share their experiences over coffee and pie. Her creativity brought people together, turning the diner into a hub of connection and inspiration. One evening, during a particularly lively storytelling session, an elderly man recounted how he had met his late wife at a booth near the window, decades ago. His voice cracked with emotion as he described their first date, and the room fell silent, moved by his words. Moments like these reminded everyone why the diner mattered. It wasn't just about food. It was about memories, relationships, and shared humanity. Mark, too, found fulfillment in his work. He spent hours perfecting the library corner, stocking it with books donated by grateful patrons. On weekends, he hosted DIY repair workshops, teaching others how to fix household items using simple tools. These sessions not only helped the community save money, but also fostered a spirit of collaboration and self-reliance. Mark often joked that he had gone from being a handyman to a teacher, though deep down, he knew his contributions meant far more than that. He had become a pillar of support for those around him, just as John had been for him and Emily when they needed it most. As for John, he discovered a renewed sense of purpose. The struggles he had faced, the financial hardships, the court battles, the fire, had taught him invaluable lessons about perseverance and faith. He realized that life wasn't about avoiding challenges. It was about facing them head-on and finding strength in the people around you. Each day, as he watched customers laugh, hug, and connect within the walls of the diner, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. This place, this family, they were his legacy. But life, as always, had its surprises. One crisp autumn morning, as John unlocked the diner's front door, he noticed a familiar figure standing across the street. It was Mr. Grayson, the lead developer who had once tried to buy the property. Clad in a tailored suit and holding a leather briefcase, he looked out of place among the bustling crowd of early risers. For a moment, John tensed, unsure of what to expect. Had the developers changed their minds? Were they planning another legal battle? To his surprise, Mr. Grayson approached with a hesitant smile. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," he said, extending a hand. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." John shook his hand cautiously. "Not at all. What can I do for you?" Mr. Grayson glanced around at the cheerful scene unfolding inside the diner. "I wanted to apologize for everything my team put you through. We underestimated the value of what you've built here. It's clear now that this isn't just a business. It's the heart of the community." John nodded slowly, still wary. "Apology accepted. But I assume there's more to this visit than just saying sorry." The developer chuckled softly. "You're right. Actually, we're launching a new initiative, a fund to support small businesses and preserve historic landmarks in the area. I'd like to offer Miller's Diner as the flagship project. All proceeds will go directly toward maintaining and expanding your operations." For a moment, John was speechless. After years of fighting against corporate greed, he never imagined one of those same corporations would come to his aid. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why the change of heart?" Mr. Grayson sighed, his expression thoughtful. "Let's just say, you've given us something to aspire to. In our line of work, it's easy to lose sight of what really matters. You reminded us that progress doesn't have to come at the expense of community. So consider this our way of giving back." Touched by the gesture, John accepted the offer. Over the following months, the partnership proved to be a game changer. With the additional funding, the diner expanded its services, offering free job training programs for unemployed residents and hosting weekly health checkups in collaboration with local clinics. The garden outside grew larger, providing fresh produce for meals and teaching children about sustainable farming. Even the mural on the wall received an update, incorporating images of the new initiatives alongside the original artwork. Facing the future. Together, despite the successes, John, Mark, and Emily remained grounded. They knew that challenges would always arise, that life was unpredictable and often unfair. But they also knew they had each other, and that made all the difference. Late-night conversations in the apartment above the diner became a cherished tradition, where they reflected on the journey so far and dreamed about the future. One evening, as they sat around the kitchen table sipping hot chocolate, Emily spoke up. "Do you think we'll ever stop having problems?" she asked innocently. Mark chuckled. "Probably not, kiddo. Life's full of ups and downs." "But that's okay," John added gently. "Because every problem is just another chance to grow stronger. As long as we stick together, we can handle anything." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "Then I'm not scared anymore." Neither was John. Looking at Mark and Emily, he realized how far they had come since that cold winter night when he had invited two strangers into his struggling diner. Back then, he had acted out of compassion, not knowing it would lead to such an incredible journey. Now, as he gazed at the faces of the two people who had become his family, he understood something profound. Kindness has a ripple effect. A single act of generosity can transform lives, not just yours, but countless others. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the diner's windows, John stood behind the counter, watching customers stream in. Laughter filled the air, plates clinked, and conversations buzzed. Outside, the garden bloomed vibrantly, a testament to renewal and growth. Inside, the walls bore witness to stories of struggle and triumph, painted in colors as vivid as the human spirit itself. Miller's Diner wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And as John served up plate after plate of comfort food, he marveled at the beauty of it all. Through fire and fury, loss and love, they had risen from the ashes to create something extraordinary. This wasn't just a diner, it was a living, breathing monument to the power of community, resilience, and hope. And as long as there were people willing to open their hearts and their doors to help one another, places like Miller's Diner would continue to shine brightly in the world, proving that even in the darkest times, light can prevail.